Hello and welcome. I'm Doug Beatty, pastor at Westside Christian Church, and I'm also a professor at Labette Community College. Um, I love archaeology, I love to travel, and I really do enjoy studying the New Testament and the Bible as a whole. I look forward to be offering a course on the Old Testament here in the future. But nonetheless, today, I just in a few moments here, about 10, 15 at the very most, will give you a little introduction to this course. Um, I'm going to introduce it for two different courses, not to let that be confusing to you. A summer course is an 8-week course, and it's pretty intense. So what we're doing is compacting the whole of the semester's worth of work into 8 short weeks, into just 2 months of June and July. So that's what's happening for the summer course. And the fall and the spring course, they're the same. They have full 15, 16 weeks of class studies, and online. You're given the freedom to do the work as you would like to, with a certain time's end of its due date. So be sure to get those in on the due date. So in the summer, it's pretty intense because you have, looks like a whole bunch of assignments all coming in at once on a night, and that's true. You do. But you also should only be taking one course in the summer, because you can spend as long as 2 hours a day and just keeping up with the course material and the work here. And a little less, or right at an hour a day if you're in the fall or spring semester. So I want to introduce to you the Harper's. It's called HarperCollins Study Bible, and it looks like this. It's written backwards for you, so I don't have a mirror to get it right, but this kind of gives you the idea. And I don't have my textbook of the class. It's Bart Ehrman's. It's black. Has some dark gray, I believe, with a white ivory setting in it of a New Testament scene on the front cover. But that is his, I believe it is the 6th edition, Oxford University Press, and it's called the New Testament, A Historical Introduction to Early Christianity. Bart Ehrman is a renowned New Testament scholar and a historian of New Testament times, and he uses a lot of history. But I want to just clue you in a little bit about Bart Ehrman. He doesn't believe, he's not a believer, he's not a Christian, and he doesn't use all of the New Testament history that's available. He skips over, so I think, some very important parts to give credence to the New Testament. He comes away with challenging the New Testament more than he gives it credit, in my opinion. However, he does use the history, and we'll be using his textbook. So the course description, we're just looking at the historical and the cultural context of all of this. And I want to briefly give you an idea of what to be expected in this course. You can read in the syllabus and make sure you have the updated one for this semester, whichever semester this may be. I do update them occasionally, and I'm in my office in my workplace, just so that you know. But number one, we're going to be looking and hoping that you will be able to summarize the content and the context of the New Testament. You'll be able to distinguish various genres of styles of writing of the New Testament represented in it, and be able to apply some tools and methods of study, result of academic biblical scholarship of the text. Now, I want to point out something that's important for you as a student. You are in college. We're doing academic work. It's very different than writing creatively for a class. It's very different than just writing for a newspaper, writing for a friend, which you never do probably. You may text, and it's very different from that. Academic writing requires a reference or citations. So when you do certain things for the final paper, you will need some inline citations. You'll need to know MLA 8, and I've got some material on YouTube that you can use, and it's listed in the Red Zone portals, so you'll be able to find those. But nonetheless, you'll be able to apply certain methods to the New Testament studies, understand them, be able to analyze texts against the backdrop of Jewish, Greek, and Roman cultures or worlds. There are three really distinct groups of people mentioned in the New Testament. They certainly are the Jewish people with Jesus. Okay, they have the apostles. They are all Jews. Okay, not all authors of the New Testament are apostles, and certainly not all authors were Jews. Luke, for instance, is not a Jew. But he was an apostle. I mean, he was an author of the New Testament. And taking just the first 4 or 5 verses of the book of Luke, you can see he is an investigative sort. He loves to inspect, and you can tell through his book that he has talked to a lot of women. He has talked to a variety of people and gotten a variety of different viewpoints for things. Of course, they all stick with the main story. No gospel writer says Paul died for sins. No New Testament writer says Peter died on the cross. No New Testament writer said Peter resurrected. These are the real key elements. And I want to point out, I think from just a spiritual sense, the point of view is that the reason the New Testament gets such high criticism is because it pronounces so many miracles, and especially the resurrection. Without the resurrection, the New Testament is just another document. Without the miracles in it, the New Testament and Bible as a whole, without the miracles, big deal. It's just a story about a few people and doing this, that, and the other, and children of Israel and the Jews. And so how they developed and what came of them. The New Testament, especially look in the book of Matthew, Matthew is really challenging the reader to recognize Jesus as the Messiah. The Messiah is the Greek, it is the Hebrew word. It is the Hebrew, the Jewish word, Messiah, for the anointed one. The Greek word for the anointed one is Christ. So and this is part of what we're wanting to help you understand in the New Testament, that different words have different connotations and real meaning behind them. The Romans really didn't care. And let me just clue you in. I also teach a world religion class. The Muslims have in the Quran, it says Jesus is the Christ, but they don't believe in the same idea of what Christ is as found in the New Testament. The Quran gives it a different perspective. So it's always important to understand very clearly the background from which people are discussing things, and especially when it comes to religious points of view. Also, just for what it's worth, department, the Muslim believes that Jesus is alive. The Muslim believes in Jesus as a prophet. They believe in the Holy Spirit. They believed in John the Baptist. And they believe that Jesus was born of a Virgin Mary. Nothing a whole lot different from the New Testament, right? But what the Muslims do not, and they vehemently oppose, is the fact that Jesus would be the Son of God, or that Jesus was ever crucified on the cross. Now, there isn't a story more documented than Jesus' crucifixion. But the Muslims do not agree. They do not accept the New Testament teaching on that. The Quran does not teach that Jesus was resurrected or that he was crucified. They teach that we're mistaken. They don't have any evidence for that, but that's their teaching. So I want to point out that there are some very real differences in religions. Certainly, real difference in the way people look at history. The Muslims do not take the history pre-Muhammad very critically. They think everything's wishy-washy, and they think after Muhammad, they think they have things right. But that's a whole nother religious affiliation, and certainly a different class. But it has affected some New Testament scholars over the years. But we need to understand the backgrounds of these different groups. Greek, because that is the language that the New Testament was written in. It was not written in Hebrew. It was not written in English. And all the translations, there's only one King James version. There is not a King James version in Spanish. Sorry to say, for those who really love King James, there's not a King James version in French. There's not a King James version in German. There's not a King James version in Hebrew. It's only in English. And it's translated from various texts of Greek that we have of the New Testament document that we have come to know and use today. Generally speaking, the New Testament is just a simple, in a way, I should be careful how to use that word, but it is really a complex document, but it is has been brought to us over the course of centuries, really 2 millennia now, millennia and a half before it was ever printed on printing press. So there have been people writing it down, and there's always been a few little scribbles and errors and spelling mistakes, and they left out a word here or there, may have skipped a page. But for the most part, the New Testament is a resoundingly consistent. And I know you may take offense to that, but hey, read it yourself. And there's a guy I really like in the defense of Christianity, and certainly the New Testament as a document, is a guy named James Werner Wallace. And his take is from, as an atheist, he was for 35 years. He has grown, he became a Christian, but as an atheist and as a police officer that was studying and doing work for the legal field in the study as a detective, he recognizes any two witnesses or more will have a different story of anything you ask. Some people just remember certain things. Some people remember something else. Some people remember yet a different detail. And all of them will recognize, hey, let's say there was a wreck in front of a store. They would all recognize, hey, yeah, there was a wreck. And some might point out different faults. Some might recognize a clothing. Some guys will come along, oh, I know that car because that was 1973, blah, 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 or something. And someone else will recognize, oh, she wore these kinds of shoes. Or someone else might recognize, hey, the people around and all the people gawking. People will notice different things, but yet they'll all see that, hey, someone's hurt in the car. They need help. And so several people will call 911. But their stories will be very different and some different in details. And that's what one of the things that I'm trying to get you to do in this New Testament work is to look at similar stories from the New Testament. And I want you to compare and contrast the way the author sees or has written about this particular event. So the history, even though Bart Ehrman doesn't mention the apostolic fathers very much, they have a really strong influence in how I understand the New Testament, because it wasn't until just 500 years ago that everyone accepted the New Testament as as real and as written by those that the names come after. For instance, Matthew was written by Matthew, John by John, Luke was written by Luke, and Acts was written by Luke. And then Paul that says he wrote, Colossians, for instance, and First, Second Timothy, and First, Second Thessalonians, and other works of the New Testament. They've just accepted, oh yeah, that's Paul. But now with different critical studies and people analyze things more as a piece of literature, they're asking a lot of different questions. Now they've always asked questions, but they've always had responses. Archaeologically, there is not any evidence that none of these things are true, that none of them are. There are no New Testament details that have been proven wrong by archaeology. But anyway, all besides that, I'm not here to prove the New Testament. I just want you to understand that there's ways to analyze it and understand that there is bias by everybody. We all have a bias. We go into it maybe with we want to prove something. I don't have anything to prove, but I do want to relay this information out to you. So we want to be able to evaluate the role of the New Testament and a lot of some questions given toward this document that has been so influential in the world. I would say it's probably one of the most influential documents of all time. But here we are studying the New Testament. Week 1 is going to have 2 lessons in it. Week 2 for a summer course. Week 2 will have 2 lessons. Week 3 will have 2 lessons. Generally, lessons are done in a 1-week course, but in the summer, it's very intense and it's hyped up. So we have twice as much in about the same amount of time, because we have half the actual time, but we're going to put them in. So just to highlight that, and do pay attention on this syllabus to do these things first. The attendance quiz and the syllabus agreement. Email me. Make sure that I get it at dougb@labette.edu. I will not accept Gmail. I can't accept Yahoo or whatever other email you might want to use. I cannot correspond with you through that medium. It has to be through the Labette email accounts, okay? We're going to do a variety of things, and I'm just looking in here. Make sure you're prompt on your submissions. Most everything's due at midnight on Sunday, so you feel like you have the weekend, but don't wait, because these things will creep up on you, and some of these assignments can get kind of lengthy. In this class, we're going to be reading almost half of the New Testament, so there'll be a lot of reading, at least a third of it, and so this is the easiest part to get points. I base everything you do with amount of points. So you want to be a point squirrel, so to speak. Get as many points as possible by reading, by submitting these papers. All papers need to be done in MLA 8. So you need to make sure that they're done in a prompt time. Be sure to know what that looks like, that you have the proper heading, that you have a page number with your last name on it up on the upper right hand corner. Every time, every document you ever submit must have a header with the page number on the other side. Okay, look that up. If you don't know how to do it, make sure you do it right. I will count off. It'll count off 20% for not doing those correctly. So have those things done. Email me if you have questions. I'm not the fastest on email. I know that. But if you have a question, you need to get on it and ask. There are discussion boards. Remember, this is easy points. 2 discussion board questions a week. Put one on early, so that by Sunday night, Sunday afternoon, Saturday, you can reply to somebody. Half of your points basically come from your post, and then other half come to the 2 replies that you make are worth 4 points each. So there's not much to it, but you need to reply to other people and respond. These questions are geared to make you think about the New Testament and they need to be real thoughts. They don't, oh yeah, that's cool. I like that idea. Jane, you did a great job. Good job. I hope everything goes well for you, just to get 75 words. They need to be something of substance. Okay. So make sure that your discussion board has some substance in it. And when it goes to exegetical writings, there's a passage of scripture I want you to exegete, and I have a full description of what that means. You're going to do this 3 or 4 times, and a passages of scripture. You do a little history study, you do a little of other things, and help you understand how they do some New Testament studies. And so you'll see those quizzes and examinations. Those are all important. Read your book. Some of the assignments will be reading the book. Some of them will be summarize the video that I submit from some of my incline class information, and some of it will be summarize something else, an article I'll have you read. So I know there's a lot to this. Just keep on top of it, keep going, and you'll do well, and you'll learn a lot about the New Testament. There's a lot to be understood, and a lot of things to kind of wash away. This is not a Sunday school class. It's not a simple little Bible study. I'm not going to just ask you for simple names and dates. This class, in fact, hardly has any dates. But I want you to understand dating in the New Testament, idea of writing the material and when it was written. It's important. But, you'll find what you like or are interested in. I would really challenge you to continue to read from the study Bible that we suggest for a textbook. And you'll just keep up with the reading. That's the main thing. And of course, the assignments. And garner as many points as possible. I will give bonus points if you do exceptionally well. But for your final paper, you need to stay within those guidelines. So that's just an introduction. I just wanted to say hello. Welcome to the class, and I hope you do well. God bless, and we'll see you online.